So a couple more readings related to contemplation of the five khandas, the five aggregates, and gave a brief introduction yesterday, a couple of, and one sutta. And I'll do two suttas today. The first one called the Mahapunama Sutta, which is Majjhima Nikaya 109. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Sawati in the eastern part, in the palace of Migara's mother. On that occasion, on the Uposta day of the 15th, on the full moon night, the Blessed One was seated in the open, surrounded by the Sangha of bhikkhus. Then a certain bhikkhu rose from his seat, arranged his upper robe on one shoulder, and extended his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One. Said to him, "Venerable Sir, I would ask the Blessed One about a certain point, if the Blessed One will grant me an answer to my question." "Sit on your own seat, bhikkhu, and ask what you like." So the bhikkhu sat on his own seat and said to the Blessed One, "Are these not, Venerable Sir, the five aggregates affected by clinging? That is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. These bhikkhus are the five aggregates affected by clinging, that is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, etc." Saying, "Good Venerable Sir," the bhikkhu delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. Then he asked him a further question. "But, Venerable Sir, in what are these five aggregates affected by clinging rooted?" "These five aggregates affected by clinging are rooted in desire, bhikkhu." "Venerable Sir, is that clinging the same as these five aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the five aggregates affected by clinging?" "Bhikkhu, that clinging is neither the same as these five aggregates affected by clinging, nor is the clinging something apart from the five aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the five aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there." And you'll see that reference come up in a number of different ways throughout the suttas, that particularly like in relation to the sense bases as well. People ask, is the fetter in the eye, or is the fetter in the object of the eye, the forms? And the answer is it's neither. It's in relation to both of them, or that it's the desire and clinging in relation to the sense organ and the object that is the fetter there. So you see that same kind of relationship in different places throughout the sutta, and that they are dependent on both being there. So his next question, "But, Venerable Sir, can there be diversity in the desire and lust regarding these five aggregates affected by clinging?" And I think that question, so it's a little bit confusing. Can there be diversity? What does that mean? And you'll see from the answer, I think that what he's referring to is, are only all five aggregates as a unit affected by clinging, or can it be just a single one or some combination? So is there diversity in the desire and lust regarding these five aggregates? "There can be, bhikkhu," the Blessed One said. "Here, bhikkhu, someone thinks thus. May my material form be thus in the future. May my feeling be thus in the future. May my perception be thus in the future. May my formations be thus in the future. May my consciousness be thus in the future." Also referring to them in the past, present, and future, but in this case the future. Thus there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding these five aggregates affected by clinging. "But, Venerable Sir, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the aggregates?" In other words, what is aggregated? What does this collection mean? Bhikkhu, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the material form aggregate. Any kind of feeling whatever, etc., far or near, this is the feeling aggregate. Any kind of perception whatever, this is the perception aggregate. Any kind of formations whatever, this is the formations aggregate. Any kind of consciousness whatever, through that combination of past, future, present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior, superior, far or near. This is the consciousness aggregate. It is in this way, bhikkhu, that the term aggregate applies to the aggregates. What is the cause and condition, Venerable Sir, for the manifestation of the material form aggregate? What is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate? The perception aggregate, the formations aggregate, the consciousness aggregate. The four great elements, bhikkhu, are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the feeling aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for manifestation of the perception aggregate. Contact is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the formations aggregate. Mentality, materiality, which is nama-rupa, is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the consciousness aggregate. So, cause and condition for material form are the four great elements. Without them, you wouldn't have material form, at least in the human body. Contact is cause and condition for all the feelings, perceptions, and volitional formations, having contact between sense-based, sense-object, and consciousness. And then mentality, nama-rupa and vijnana. Nama-rupa is cause and condition for manifestation of vijnana consciousness, and as I think I mentioned yesterday, they're often seen as two bundles of reeds leaning up against each other, dependent on each other, consciousness and nama-rupa. Venerable Sir, how does identity view come to be? Identity view is the translation for Sakaya Ditti, one of the first three fetters. Here bhikkhu, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true man and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self, perception as self, formations as self, consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. This is how identity view comes to be. Sometimes Sakaya Ditti is translated as personality view as well. I think I like identity view better myself. But Venerable Sir, how does identity view not come to be? Here bhikkhu, a well-taught noble disciple, who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true man and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard material form as self, or self as in material form, etc. He does not regard feeling as self, perception as self, formations as self, consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view does not come to be. What, Venerable Sir, is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of material form? What is the gratification? What is the danger? And what is the escape in the case of feeling, perception, formations, consciousness? The pleasure and joy, bhikkhu, that arise in dependence on material form. This is the gratification in the case of material form. Material form is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. This is the danger in the case of material form. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for material form. This is the escape in the case of material form. The pleasure and joy that arise in dependence on feeling, perception, formations, consciousness. This is the gratification in the case. Consciousness is impermanent, suffering and subject to change. This is the danger. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust. This is the escape. Venerable Sir, how does one know, how does one see, so that in regard to this body, with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, and underlying tendency to conceit? And I-making and mind-making are a combination of ways, things that you see in regard to the self-making process. I-making being ahankara, and mind-making being mamankara. Bhikkhu, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, one sees all material form as it actually is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Any kind of feeling, whatever, perception, formations, consciousness, whatever, one sees all of that as is actually is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. It is when one knows and sees thus that in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, or underlying tendency to conceit. Then, in the mind of a certain bhikkhu, this thought arose. So, it seems, material form is not self, feeling is not self, perception is not self, formations are not self, consciousness is not self. What self, then, will actions be done by the not-self affect? Then the Blessed One, knowing in his mind the thought in the mind of that bhikkhu, addressed the bhikkhus thus. It is possible, bhikkhus, that some misguided man here, obtuse and ignorant, with his mind dominated by craving, might think that he can outstrip the teacher's dispensation thus. Quote, so it seems material form is not self, consciousness is not self. What self then will actions done by the not-self affect? Now, bhikkhus, you have been trained by me through the interrogation on various occasions in regard to various things. Bhikkhus, what do you think? Is material form permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. Bhikkhus, what do you think? Is feeling, perception, formations, consciousness permanent or impermanent? Impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of material form whatever, whether past, future, or present, etc., all material form should be seen as it is, with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And so on for feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. Seeing thus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted with material form, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perception, disenchanted with formations, disenchanted with consciousness. Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge. It is liberated. He understands. Birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now, while this discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 bhikkhus were liberated from the taints or the outflows. So again, by way of a series of questions and answers, the Buddha pretty much goes through the standard teachings that you see repeated over and over again in so many ways of the teaching on the Five Khandas in relation to their qualities of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, what we call the three characteristics. And, I don't know, I just reflect that in so many ways, in so many different places, and, so many different angles and approaches, this teaching, the Buddha just repeatedly and consistently hammers it in over and over again, because it's just a reflection that takes a slow time, usually a long time for us to incorporate, supplemented by the clarity of mind that comes from practicing meditation to calm the mind, to clear the mind. The purpose of that being to obtain clarity, super clarity, to be able to actually see and experience these qualities of dukkha, anicca, anatta. And also I'm always hit and reflect like how disenchantment is the result from this, and disenchanted not in terms of developing a sense of indifference, but disenchanted in terms of waking up, not being enchanted any longer by the illusions of the Five Khandas. So it's a way of, it's the result, it's kind of the emotional response to clear seeing, clear comprehension, seeing through the lens of Dhamma. Waking up. So I'll move on now to a few selections from Majjhima Nikaya 44, the Chula Vedala Sutta. And this is a series of questions and answers from the lay follower Visaka, who has come to the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna to ask some questions. And according to the commentaries, the history is that they actually used to be married, and then Dhammadinna went forth as a bhikkhuni and became fully enlightened. She's an arahant. And her former husband, the lay follower Visaka, apparently, according to commentaries, is actually a non-returner, I think. Is that right? Let's see if that's what. He's up there somewhere. Yeah, the note just mentions her arahantship. Doesn't mention his. Oh yeah, it does. Visaka was a wealthy merchant of Rajagaha and a non-returner. Okay, Dhammadinna, his former wife in lay life, had attained arahantship soon after her ordination as a bhikkhuni, and she was declared by the Buddha the foremost bhikkhuni disciple in expounding the Dhamma. So these are two quite realized beings asking and answering questions. Okay, so Visaka sits down at one side. Then the lay follower Visaka went to the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, and after paying homage to her, he sat down at one side and asked her, "Lady, identity is said. What is called identity by the Blessed One?" And that would be Sakaya, I believe. "Friend Visaka, these five aggregates affected by clinging are called identity by the Blessed One. That is, the material form aggregate affected by clinging, the feeling aggregate affected by clinging, the perception aggregate affected by clinging, the formations aggregate affected by clinging, and the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. These five aggregates affected by clinging are called identity by the Blessed One." Saying, Good, lady, the lay follower Visaka, delighted and rejoiced in the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna's words. Then he asked her a further question. Lady, origin of identity is said. What is called the origin of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visaka, it is craving, which brings renewal of being, is accompanied by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of identity by the Blessed One. Lady, cessation of identity is said. What is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visaka, it is the remainderless fading away and ceasing, the giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting of that same craving. This is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One. Lady, the way leading to the cessation of identity is said. What is the way? What is called the way leading to the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visaka, it is just this noble eightfold path. That is, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Lady, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Friend Visaka, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging there. Which is exactly how the Buddha answered it in the first discourse I read. Lady, how does identity view come to be? And that would be Sakkaya Ditthi in the first 3 letters, Sakkaya Ditthi. Here, friend Visaka, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self, or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He regards perception as self, or self as possessed of perception, or perception as in self, or self as in perception. He regards formations as self, or self as possessed of formations, or formations as in self, or self as in formations. He regards consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view comes to be. Lady, how does identity view not come to be? Here, friend Visaka, a well-taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. Similarly, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. That is how identity view does not come to be. And then there are some more questions and answers not specifically related to the 5 Khandas, which I will skip over, but heartily recommend your reading this if you haven't already. Very good questions and very good answers. But I'll jump to a section on question around feeling, because feeling, Vedanā, is one of the 5 aggregates. Lady, how many kinds of feeling are there? Friend Visaka, there are 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. just going to pause there for a minute. Vedana is sometimes a confusing word because we use the translation of the word feeling, Vedana as feeling. I think I've heard and I agree, it's a little bit better maybe to translate it as feeling tone, because the word feeling has so many different connotations in the English language. Either sometimes feeling is used for the experience of tactile sensation, like feeling the touch of the floor, or the hardness of the floor, or whatever, feeling my hands on my knees. That kind of feeling of tactile sensation is also often referring to mental states, emotional states, like I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling happy. So feeling tone, I think, more accurately describes it, because it's the pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant feeling tone in regard to any form of contact, whether it's physical or mental. It just refers to that particular aspect of the experience in contact. So she answers that there are those three kinds of feeling, and then he asks another question. But lady, what is pleasant feeling? What is painful feeling? What is neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, whether it is felt bodily or mentally as pleasant and soothing, is pleasant feeling. So therefore you see, it is both body and mental aspects. Sometimes you hear it taught that it's strictly bodily feeling in relation to tactile sensation, but the Buddha clearly, and Sister Dhammadinna clearly state that it's either a bodily or mental experience. So whatever is felt bodily or mentally as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as neither soothing nor hurting is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, what is pleasant and what is painful in regard to pleasant feeling? What is painful and what is pleasant in regard to painful feeling? What is pleasant and what is painful in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists, and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it persists, and pleasant when it changes. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge of it, and painful when there is no knowledge or awareness of it. That's a really lovely description, I think, of the experience as these feelings change, which they inevitably do. Lady, what underlying tendency underlies pleasant feeling? What underlying tendency underlies painful feeling? What underlying tendency underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, the underlying tendency to lust underlies pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion underlies painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust underlie all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion underlie all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Which I think describes the fact that, when the mind is clear and these underlying tendencies are not in operation, and when they're completely eradicated at arahantship, then you still have feeling. You still have painful, pleasant, and neutral feeling. They're just the underlying tendencies have been uprooted, so that there's no reactive quality to that experience. Lady, what should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, the underlying tendency to lust should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So again, just pointing out that dukkha, suffering, is in the reaction, resistance, absorption in our experience, in the confusion, ignorance that accompanies all of that. It's not in the experience itself, it's in the dukkha that we can do something about, that we don't have to experience, is in that responsiveness, reactivity. It's the old saying, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, the underlying tendency to lust does not have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Here, friend Visaka, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. With that, he abandons lust, and the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie that. I'll read a footnote regarding that from Bhikkhu Bodhi. The commentaries explain that the bhikkhu suppresses the tendency to lust and attains the first jhana. Having made the tendency to lust well suppressed by the jhana, he develops insight and then eradicates the tendency to lust by the path of the non-returner. But because it has been suppressed by the jhana, it is said the underlying tendency to lust does not underlie that. So basically what she's saying is that you can use that tendency to move into a skillful form of sense pleasure, if you will, or the pleasure of concentration, using it as a skillful tool to then use that clarity of mind and that skillful tool as a means of eradicating the underlying tendency itself. So essentially, using the pleasure, using the underlying tendency as a tool to undo itself, or to unravel itself. That's how I interpret that. Here a bhikkhu considers thus, when shall I enter upon and abide in that base that the noble ones now enter upon and abide in? In one who thus generates a longing for the supreme liberation, grief arises with that longing as condition. With that he abandons aversion, and the underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie that. So similarly, one does have a painful experience, that longing for supreme liberation, that grief that arises with longing as that condition, but you use that as your tool to actually abandon aversion and that underlying tendency. Here, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. With that, he abandons ignorance, and the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie that. Lady, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Friend Visaka, painful feeling is the counterpart of pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of painful feeling? Pleasant feeling is the counterpart of painful feeling. What is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Ignorance is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling. What is the counterpart of ignorance? True knowledge is the counterpart of ignorance. What is the counterpart of true knowledge? Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. What is the counterpart of deliverance? Nibbana is the counterpart of deliverance. Lady, what is the counterpart of Nibbana? Friend Visaka, you have pushed this line of questioning too far. You are not able to grasp the limit to questions. For the holy life, friend Visaka is grounded upon Nibbana, culminates in Nibbana, ends in Nibbana. If you wish, friend Visaka, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this. As the Blessed One explains it to you, so you should remember it. Then the lay follower Visaka, having delighted and rejoiced in the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna's words, rose from his seat, and after paying homage to her, keeping her on his right, he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told the Blessed One this entire conversation with the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna. When he finished speaking, the Blessed One told him, the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna is wise, Visaka. Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna has explained it. Such is its meaning, and so you should remember it. This is what the Blessed One said. The lay follower of Visaka was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Okay. So, two very powerful suttas regarding contemplation of the five aggregates, and then particularly in regard to the feeling aggregate. Any questions or thoughts, comments, reflections?
I was just thinking in the last part of the question that Visaka was asking Sister Dhammadinna, what, you used the word counterpart. What's the counterpart? I wonder if that, how exactly is that to be understood? Like something that goes along with something else? Like they come together or they alternate or something? Or?
It kind of varies through each of the examples that it gives of how the word is used, and I found that kind of confusing too. I think, if I remember, I didn't look this time, but I think that the Bhikkhu Bodhi has a footnote around that. Let's see. Yeah, just a short comment. A couple comments. The word counterpart, patibhaga, is used to express the relationships of both opposition and supplementation. So, like in the first few examples, he's talking about what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling, and then the response from Visaka, from Sister Dhammadinna is painful feeling is the counterpart of pleasant feeling, so they're the opposites. But then it sounds like it adopts that, according to Bhikkhu Bodhi's thing, adopts more the relationship of supplementation when it comes to like what is the counterpart of true knowledge. Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. It's not an opposite, it's more like an accompanying quality, if you will. And then, of course, he asked the question, what's the counterpart of Nibbana? And she said, you've gone too far. And he does have one more comment here about one of these, about the one that ignorance is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Bhikkhu Bodhi's footnote is, ignorance is its counterpart because neither painful nor pleasant feeling is subtle and difficult to recognize. And then the commentaries, from the commentaries, Nibbana does have an opposite counterpart, namely conditioned states, But in the strict sense, it has no supplementary counterpart, for how can there be anything to supplement Nibbana, the unconditioned? Interesting.
You wouldn't think that a non-returner would have questions.
Oh, well, a non-returner has gone a long ways, but they still have, 5 fetters to kind of undo. So there's still the fetter of the fetters of rupa raga and arupa raga, which is like desire for existence in the form realm, or desire for existence in the formless realm. And there's still restlessness, udacha, and there's still the conceit, I am, asmimana, so a subtle form of self-view that hasn't been cleared away. Personality view has been cleared away, but the subtle form of self has not. There's still that lingering essence of a sense of me, I am. And then the last fetter of avijja, ignorance, meaning not fully penetrating. So you can be not fully penetrating, the Four Noble Truths, how suffering arises and how to see an end to it. So there's still, none of us would be unhappy if, we attained that state of non-returning, because that's also like essentially the elimination of the gross forms of suffering related to desire and aversion, essentially. Those are uprooted. But there's still, in terms of ignorance, there's still an overlay of ignorance. So, it's great that he just keeps on plugging away with question after question, because he hasn't realized the end of the path yet. So.
I thought it was interesting. There was one point near the end where she says that it was after saying that the first jhana, when the bhikkhu enters the first jhana, at that point lust is like suppressed or kind of non-active, and then that becomes the basis for overcoming lust.
Right.
Which definitely in terms of like sensual pleasure, But then for the one after that, she talks about the bhikkhu generates the longing for nibbana, basically, and how that's,
or has the longing for it.
Yeah. And I know I've seen that in another sutta where Buddha talks about that as like that's like a painful spiritual feeling, or something like that.
Right.
Oh man, when am I going to get?
Right.
But when am I going to reach the goal of this practice?
Yeah.
Having a high ideal and wanting to go there, but realizing that one isn't there.
Yeah.
And then but it's just kind of curious. Like I guess I don't quite understand how that's connected to aversion. Or I could see that is a bit of an aversion, I guess, because one has this ideal and one's not there and one's not living with those ideals. And maybe is that the connection that she says that's what that aversion is what leads one to progress further in the path and overcome
the underlying tendency towards it.
Like aversion, which would become overcome with anagami, the path of anagami.
Lessened on the Sakyadagami. Did I say that right? Sakyadagami. And eliminated with anagami. That's how I understand it. It is just exactly as you said. It's that it is a very subtle form of aversion. It's like, I wish I weren't like this. I wish I could, see the end to this suffering, into this state. So it is a subtle, you can see in terms of like emotional or affective qualities. It's felt as a don't want this, want something else.
But it's like that needs to be there to spur us on to practice.
It's a healthy. It's like using our defilements as factors to propel us along the path. using the poison to affect the cure. That's how I see it anyway.
Right.
The hair of the dog. Okay, wrap it up for today then, and then tomorrow Ajahn Chanda will do some readings along this topic line.